Hi, good morning. My name's Karla Wilson. I'm Communications Lead with Family Caregivers of British Columbia. I'm a long distance caregiver to my mom who lives in Ontario with my sister and her family and is coming out for a visit to British Columbia soon as my siblings and I continue to share the care for mom. And I'm also a full-time employed caregiver. Being in communications as well as being a caregiver myself, I seemed an appropriate choice to lead this video, which focuses on communicating with workplaces. So I'm going to start the video with a few numbers. And when I started research for doing this video, I will say some of the numbers were pretty staggering to me. So first, we know that about 28% of Canadians provide care to a family or friend with a long-term health condition, disability, or someone who's aging. And right now, about 6 million of those caregivers or Canadians combine paid work with some level of unpaid care. So about 1/3 of the employed workforce in Canada is also caregiving to some degree. And most of these caregivers work full-time. About 1/3 of the caregivers in the workforce are considering leaving their jobs so they can do a better job of supporting their care recipients. All of these numbers were completely shocking to me when I first started reading about them, but of course, given that this is my situation as well as the situation of many of my colleagues, I thought, well, yes, of course, this is what's happening right now. A lot of us are in the sandwich generation with aging parents as well as kids that we're raising. Of course, the population is aging, and this is the reality that we are currently living in. So as a working caregiver, definitely it's hard to feel like you can do two things well at once. Something's got to give. Either your care recipient isn't getting the level of care that you believe that he or she deserves, or your employer isn't getting the best of you at all times. So that's the focus of this leaning in, is how to communicate with workplaces when you are a working caregiver, and when you perhaps need to fit caregiving into your life as well as being an employee. So we do hear a lot here at FCBC from working caregivers who wish they had more support from their employers. And one of the ways to get more support, obviously, is to communicate effectively at work about what your personal situation might be, so that there can be arrangements made, or things can change so that work and caregiving does still work for you. So today, my focus is going to be on how to communicate well with an employer and hopefully get into a position where you feel like you are doing both caregiving and working at your optimal ability. So first, in terms of communications, one of the things you always have to do is do your homework. So learn about the options that your workplace might provide. This might include looking at HR policy, but it also might include chatting with people within the organization, because often there are policies or options available that are not formally documented for employees. You can also find out whether you're eligible for any benefits, financial benefits, or leave benefits through government. So I'll pop the link into the chat so you can investigate the various types of leave that may be available to you as an employed caregiver, and benefits you could apply for depending on the situation that you find yourself in. Obviously, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, many employers are willing to be a bit more flexible with their employees and with working arrangements. There's, a variety of things available. Many of us are able to work from home. That's obviously a big flexibility piece. But also employers are often looking now at offering flexible working hours, where maybe you might want to, start earlier or start later in the day, depending on your caregiving duties. You might, if you're able to, look into a job share. You might look into the idea of working longer days for, if you're working a 5-day work week, working longer days for 4 of those days, and being able to take the 5th day off. So there's a lot of creative options that employees can come up with, and often employers are willing to support those options as well. So once you've done your homework and you've figured out what you want as a caregiver, the next step is obviously to schedule a meeting with your manager. Make sure that you've figured out what you want before you schedule the meeting, so that if the meeting happens quickly, you're prepared and armed with information, and that you are very clear about what you're asking for. One thing I've been taught along the way in my communications role is to frame conversations very much as what, so what, and now what. Framing it in the way of what is obviously the situation you currently find yourself in, that you are a working caregiver and this is your life at the moment. So what is obviously the impacts that this is having on you, perhaps the impacts it's having on your employer as well. And then the now what, which would be your proposal going forward and what you'd like to see in terms of what, any changes you'd like to make to your own role in an organization. Another thing to think about as before you communicate is to chat with a colleague, a trusted colleague, or a friend beforehand, and do a bit of a role play where you have somebody who's acting in the role as your manager and might be asking you some tough questions, so that you are prepared before going in and having the conversation and armed with the information you need, and that you've really thought it out and had the chance to have the conversation first, so that it comes across as very professional and well thought through before you have the meeting. So obviously, there must be reciprocity. So if your employer is doing something for you, you must also, definitely be doing something for your employer, and approaching the conversation from, if you do, if you are granted, different working arrangements from your employer, this is what, in return, the employer can expect from you. Also very important in your communications. So you might get an immediate answer. You might have to wait for an answer from your employer. But when you do get the answer, another step in communicating is definitely to take the initiative to set up future ongoing conversations, so that you can have a back and forth conversation around how things are working for you as an employed caregiver. And also the employer can provide some perspective and balance on what is working well in the relationship for the employer, and if it is indeed working well, if changes have been made. So keeping those lines of communication open is also very important. As I talked about earlier, if about 1/3 of caregivers in the workforce are considering leaving their jobs, which is what stats tell us, the other thing to consider is that if you are considering doing that as an employed caregiver, it's often nice to go in and have that conversation first to see if there's anything the employer might offer you in order to stay on, because often there's options you might not have even considered along your path, and perhaps an employer can come back with options that can make your life easier as a caregiver. So we're going to pop some additional resources into the chat box for you in this video, so that you can see both employer toolkits as well as employee toolkits for employed caregivers, as well as the government benefits I had mentioned earlier that you may be eligible to apply for as a caregiver, if that's the path that you're interested in following. So I hope this little chat has helped. We wish you well on your journey as an employed caregiver. I know it's not easy. We are here to help. So our caregiver support line staff are compassionate. They are well educated, and they know the challenges that come along with caregiving. So feel free to give them a call Monday through Friday to have a conversation on your personal scenario. We've got caregiver coaching available as a service. And we definitely have a lot of resources available through our caregiver learning center, on our website. So we're here to help. and wishing you well on this day. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll chat with you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.